women who get together with other women are healthier, happier, and stronger.
Now we can make some figure eights with our hips. Figure eight, figure eight, figure eight, figure eight. Woo!
By the time I met Mickey, I had already contemplated suicide and I was developing a plan. That's how dark my life had gotten.
Because I'm a woman, phenomenal woman, that's me.
Welcome to Prime Time for Women, the show for and about women in their prime. Hosting this program is a privilege. I love meeting inspirational women and then having the chance to introduce them to you. Some of my guests are creative podcast hosts, some are powerful female entrepreneurs, and some are educators looking to share knowledge that benefits others. Today's guest, Coyne, is all of these, as well as a community volunteer, serving on the boards for the Washington County Community Foundation and the Women's Giving Circle. As a certified financial planner for 20 years, Karen offers clients extensive knowledge of comprehensive wealth management. As a businesswoman, mother of young children, and a community leader, Karen has firsthand knowledge of the hectic pace of life. She recognizes that many people have little time to think about, much less manage the many financial responsibilities that accompany success. That's why she's dedicated herself and her business to helping others understand and manage their finances. Welcome, Karen. Thanks for being on Prime Time for Women today.
Thank you, Bernadette. Thanks for having me.
So, Karen, I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about something that might be difficult, but you came to a very early understanding of the importance of financial planning. Could you share that with our viewers?
Yes, absolutely. So I grew up in a family where wealth management wasn't a term that was ever thrown around. I knew that we weren't poor, but I knew that we weren't as comfortable as maybe some other families in some of the more upscale neighborhoods where I grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago. My family relocated to Winchester, Virginia when I was in high school. My dad worked a night shift at Western Union in Stevens City. And he was on his way home from work, probably around 1:30 or 2 a.m. in the morning, and was hit broadside. He was T-boned and was killed instantly.
Oh, sorry for your loss.
Thank you. And so that was, I was 15, so that was 32, 33 years ago, many years ago. Mm-hmm. But when you have something like that, you know, when you get that knock on your door at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., you know right then and there that your life has changed and it's never going back. It's never going to be the same. And that sounds a lot like a conversation we're having these days, but it definitely was, you know, a moment where you know it's never going to be the same as it was before.
Yeah, it's so unforeseen.
So unforeseen, and even as a teenager, like I said, I was 15 at the time, but even at the time I realized that we could have been destitute with his loss because he was the breadwinner. My mom stayed at home, and she would not have been able to support my two siblings and
right.
I know she would not have been capable of that. So had my father not done a very basic level of planning, we would have been destitute.
Right.
And so even when I was young, I realized how important it was to have a basic level of planning.
Yeah, so speaking of unforeseen things, this pandemic is certainly something that's unforeseen and has impacted many people financially and otherwise. I was wondering, how has it impacted your life personally? I mean, you're a mom, you're a businesswoman. How has that impacted you?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm fortunate in that my work is considered essential, number one, and that number two, I own my own practice. I run my own business. So I have a little bit more control over my day-to-day than others who don't have that luxury. So I've considered myself so fortunate in that way. But like many others, yes, I'm juggling, you know, online 100% virtual learning. Both my children attend Washington County Public Schools. You know, I have a small team, and so I'm responsible for their well-being as well.
Right.
And then clients and just making sure that we're engaging with them in a way that's
Did you ever think that Zoom would replace business meetings and dinner parties, or?
No, I did not. In fact, we had started using Zoom last year because of the podcast that I host that you mentioned. And so I was already comfortable with Zoom, but a lot of people were not, and were not so familiar with it. So now, of course, it's very common, but no, I definitely would not have predicted that.
So I remember when parents spent a lot of times trying to limit their kids' screen time. I think it's probably a little different now, isn't it? You have to make sure they're on the screens at a certain time.
No kidding. That's
Yeah.
100% true. One silver lining has been that my older son, who watches TikTok, has actually learned how to cook a couple meals based on TikTok videos he's watched. So that did not happen during school hours, but that was a silver lining byproduct of too much screen time.
That's great. Well, despite the disastrous impact of the pandemic, if we knew where to look, we could all find some silver linings. When we come back from this commercial break, I hope you'll share some of the silver linings of the COVID cloud with us. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
14 years ago, he diagnosed her with cystic fibrosis.
Our doctors read charts and test results.
Knowing my family history, she screened me early for colon cancer.
They read medical journals and digital images. But the most important thing they read,
He put down the laptop, he looked me in the eye, and listened.
are their patients. Meritus Medical Group, home to your extraordinary doctor.
Before the break, Karen and I were discussing some of the hardships, financial and otherwise, associated with the pandemic. Fortunately, Karen, who is a certified financial planner, is now going to share some of the positive news with us. So Karen, you recently wrote a blog entitled Turning COVID-19 into a Teachable Moment for Our Families. Just seeing the pandemic has some positive, helpful, seems like it's encouraging. Can you share some of the advice with us?
Sure, yeah. I remember writing that early on in the pandemic, and the main takeaway was that it's about being real. So not trying to shelter our kids from the realities around us. And of course, being age appropriate. But in my case, it was, talking to my kids, not assigning blame. This is the situation, this is the world that we're living in. And also, how can we help others? I mean,
Right.
as difficult as this is for us, there are also other people who might really need some help.
Right, yeah.
And I think that when children are able to see it in that lens, it also reframes their lens.
I was just going to say, do you think when kids feel that they have the power to help others, that there's less anxiety, they have a sense of control?
100%,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And that's sort of what your financial business does too, is provide people with control over their finances.
Yes,
too.
and
Yeah.
so it's also about dealing with the reality of the situation. Even if it's not the reality that you thought that you wanted to have at a certain point, it's about turning on the lights and taking inventory of the situation and then
Moving forward.
moving forward.
That's great. So there's a lot of information out there about the stimulus bill or the CARES Act that people are still processing. So it's sometimes a little confusing. What are some of the key parts of this bill that can provide financial help for families this time?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. There was so much information in that. And again, that's something else that happened earlier this year. The stimulus payments that went out got a lot of the attention. And some people might not realize that the required minimum distributions have been waived this year. So anyone who's 70 and a half or older who's been taking required minimum distributions, they don't have to do that this year. So that may help in certain circumstances. That's where you definitely want to talk to your advisor, you want to talk to your tax attorney and make the right selection for you. And the other thing is that on the flip side of that, with the CARES Act, if you're 70 and a half or older and still earning income, you are now eligible to make contributions to a traditional IRA, whereas previously you were not. You aged out at 70 and a half. And so for folks who still want to put money away and get potentially a deduction, that's an option that's now on the table. And I feel like that got lost in all the other stimulus noise.
Well, I'm glad you're paying attention and sharing that with us. In a recent presentation that you've done, I think, at different civic organizations, and you've talked about the top 10 takeaways of 2020. We probably don't have time for 10, but maybe you could share with us the top 3 to 5 takeaways?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I can do 3 off the top of my head.
Okay,
So,
go.
One is the Secure Act, which was passed late last year and became effective in January. That eliminated the stretch IRA provision, which is hugely important for anyone that has a significant amount of their net worth in IRAs and qualified retirement plans. If they have estate plans that incorporate the stretch IRA provision, they need to talk to their advisors, their attorney, their financial advisors, stat, because it could render their plans totally void and not effective. So that's one, elimination of the stretch IRA. The second one I would say is if you have children or grandchildren who are applying to college, there are a lot of considerations. We recently did a podcast on that, so I would say check out the podcast that we recently did with Michelle Jacobs on college admissions in the era of COVID-19. And then the last item I want to make sure I call attention to is this election that we're dealing with. A lot of people are putting decisions on hold because I'm going to wait and see how the election turns out. Well, that's generally not a good financial move. You don't want to have that influence potentially how you're moving your portfolio around. If you have a plan,
Stick with it?
stick with it.
Okay. All
Unless something else has changed, but it's probably not because of the election.
Okay, that's good to know. And you just mentioned your podcast. It's called Fresh Off the Vine. I've listened to it. It's always informative and interesting, sometimes entertaining. It's sometimes lighthearted. Depending on the day, you seem really comfortable talking complex financial matters and wine and fun civic things going on. How can our viewers hear it?
Great. Yes, they should definitely listen because they'll find an episode that we did together not that long ago.
Yeah, that was fun.
Which was a fun episode. But again, it's called Fresh Off the Vine and it's available on Spotify.
And is it also on your website? Can people access it through your website?
They should also be able to access it, yes, through the website.
And what is your website?
It's raymondjames.com/clarity.
Okay. And if you could share a little bit of advice about, if you could only give one bit of advice, what would you say to our viewers?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I think especially in a period like now where there's so much going on, we're just getting bombarded with news and various messaging, and there's a lot of angst, and it's very easy to get carried away in that and to feel helpless.
Right.
And so it's really, really important to dial that back and focus on what you can control. Focus on your own actions, focus on your own behaviors, everything from just your own physical activity to the financial items as well that you can control. But that's the main takeaway.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's this huge crossover, whether you're talking about financial well-being, physical well-being, emotional and spiritual well-being, that this idea that a lot of what impacts us is the stories we tell ourselves. So if we tell ourselves we can't cope, we're not going to be able to cope in any of those areas. If we tell ourselves we believe we can do this, we can take one step forward at a time, there's so much more that we're able to do because we don't have that negative energy.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more.
Okay, and I was just real quickly, one last question. Do you share that same advice with your children in your parenting?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, parenting. I do. I should say I share it. Whether it's always heated is another story. But yes, we've had our share of meltdowns through this whole experience, and you marinate sometimes in the moment of, yeah, I hate this feels yucky, whatever, but then ultimately you peel yourself out and you move forward.
Great. I don't know about you, but I always appreciate it when someone takes the time to point out the positives in a difficult situation. I'd like to thank Karen for joining us on today's program and reminding us that things are not always as bad as they seem. When it comes to financial matters, if you have questions, fears, concerns, or are excited about a new adventure, or just want to learn more, there are resources that are available to you. Check out a book from your library, take an online course, or call your certified financial planner. You don't have to go it alone. Remember, we are stronger, healthier, and better together. Don't go away. We'll be right back with our next guest after this short commercial break.
14 years ago, he diagnosed her with cystic fibrosis.
Our doctors read charts and test results.
Knowing my family history, she screened me early for colon cancer.
They read medical journals and digital images. But the most important thing they read
He put down the laptop He looked me in the eye and listened.
Are their patients. Meritus Medical Group, home to your extraordinary doctor.
The DVR, it's changed the way we watch TV. And now, Antietam Broadband takes you to the next level with TiVo. Find your favorites on cable or streaming video faster with voice-activated integrated search. Record up to 6 channels at once and watch from any TV in your home. TiVo from Antietam Broadband. It will change your life. Call today or visit AntietamBroadband.com to learn more.
Our previous guest shared some important tips and insights on financial well-being. Just as important, our next guest is going to speak about physical, emotional, and mental well-being. It's my pleasure to welcome Tina Fraley to today's show. She's a nutrition coach, a certified personal trainer, and Blackhat group instructor at Soldierfit Hagerstown, and a master's level community counselor with over 20 years of experience in the mental health field. Obviously, to hold all those titles, she has pursued and mastered coursework and content in numerous fields. But Tina is unique in that much of her knowledge in these areas was gained through personal experience as she faced and overcame tremendous adversity. As a mom of 7, a domestic abuse survivor, and someone that has lost over 150 pounds, Tina's journey to improved physical and mental well-being has taught her a great deal. I'm excited to have Tina on today's show to tell us about her own transformational journey and to share what she's learned along the way. Tina, thanks for being here. I'm really glad you were able to make it.
You're very welcome. I'm so excited to have this opportunity with you this morning.
That's great. That's great. Well, listen, Tina, it's universally true that people struggle. It's also true that the struggles, although painful, can sometimes be a motivation to change. They can be the kick in the pants that we sometimes need. I was wondering if you would be comfortable to tell us a little bit about your struggles with domestic abuse and how that informed you and motivated you.
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to. So about 10 years ago, I actually kind of cut a string and started my life over. I had been staying in a relationship for 9 years with my first 5 children, and my ex-husband was very verbally abusive, very physically abusive, and was suffering with alcoholism. And I didn't fully understand everything at that time, but what I knew was that I needed to put myself and my children in a position that we were healthier in mind and body and physically safer. So 10 years ago, I left that relationship, but I didn't fully process what had taken place. And so I started to really put on a lot of weight and carry the angst and the stress of that relationship that I wasn't processing. Mm-hmm. And so what I had to start doing was kind of unraveling all of that and taking it step by step and focusing more on my mindset at the time.
Well, I guess that leads me to my next question. So this emotional and physical trauma that you experience, it impacts every aspect of life,
Absolutely,
right?
Yes.
What were the steps you took to begin that transformational journey? You said step by step, but could you delineate those steps?
Absolutely. So the first step was really taking a better look at myself in my life and truly in the mirror. I had a moment when my youngest daughter now, who's 10, I was breastfeeding her. And I was sitting in the room and I was trying to find a comfortable position. And there's no fully comfortable position for that. But I was almost 300 pounds at the time.
Wow.
And they don't make the boppy that big. And so I was trying to just find a spot where I could nourish my child and give her what she needed, but also find a spot that I felt comfortable.
Right.
That I could be the mom that I wanted to be with her in that moment. And I was struggling. And I just had an emotional breakdown. I remember looking down at her face and realizing that something needed to change, that something as simple as not being able to feed my own child, I was in control of, and I had the ability to make steps away from that stuck point. So I started to look at moving more in my life, and physically moving more led to me learning how to eat more effectively. And then that led me to having more mindfulness in my life. And then stringing the 3 of those steps together has built the last 10 years of losing that 150 pounds and literally changing my life.
And Tina, do you think that your children, that your daughter was the motivation?
She absolutely
or at least
was.
one of the motivators, right?
One of the 7 motivators, yes. I like to look at my kids as just, sometimes they're raising me in a lot of ways. I really know that what I've gone through has been something that I've been able to use as a parenting tool along the way, because I'm giving them life skills that I know I didn't have growing up, and that piece of survivalness is something that they're going to be able to use current day.
Well, you're modeling that for them, so that's great. And your relationship with your spouse, did that change too?
Very much so. It's very different to marry someone as you are that day and then realize that you're not the same person you were when you said, I love you forever. So, and I do get a little emotional with this one, but he's my absolute best friend, and we actually met in high school. So to have someone come back into my life 10 years after I met him the first time and then walk the rest of this journey with me. He was placed right where I needed him at the time.
That's great. You know, you have so much more to tell us, and we're going to hear more of your story when we come back after this short commercial break. Stay tuned, don't go away.
"14 years ago, he diagnosed her with cystic fibrosis.
Our doctors read charts and test results.
Knowing my family history, she screened me early for colon cancer.
They read medical journals and digital images. But the most important thing they read,
He put down the laptop, he looked me in the eye, and listened.
are their patients. Meritus Medical Group, home to your extraordinary doctor.
Before the break, we were talking with Tina about her struggles and what she learned as a result of facing them. Let's now hear from Tina how she's using that information to help others. So Tina, regardless of the issue, I know that you encourage long-term success one step at a time. And I was wondering if you could talk about your and emphasize your philosophy of bridging the mind and body together.
Absolutely. That's my favorite thing to talk about. So I believe that there's an emotional aspect to physical transformation, and what I found for myself along the way when I went on this journey was there was not a whole lot of comprehensive support to turn to. I'm aging myself when I say this, but there was no yellow pages to look up someone and go, why am I crying when I'm trying to do a burpee?
Yeah.
And why does this hurt emotionally when I'm trying to just physically change my life? So I developed what I call a very simple 3-step process. You eat foods that serve you, you move in ways that make your body feel good, and you believe in yourself. And if you do those 3 things consistently on a daily basis, not focusing on what you did yesterday and not worrying about what you're going to do tomorrow, but every moment of every day focusing on a 24-hour plan, you can change your life.
Yeah, that attention to the now, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's important. That's really important. So you're involved in many programs that support wellness in our community. You teach at HCC, you're working with Prime Time for Women on Walking to Wellness, Curves Ahead, High Achievers Mastermind, Soldierfit, all these different things. Just tell us a little bit about how you use those 3 components in each of these areas.
Absolutely. So with HCC, I built a program called Leading Healthy Lives, and I teach the Eat, Move, Believe model, and I have them sequenced out into 2-week increments. We focus on eating and different styles of nutrition that do and can work differently for each individual. And then we have a 2-week focus on movement, where I introduce exercise for where you're at in your journey. That can be no experience, or it could be extreme exercise. And then we finish with 2 weeks of focusing on your belief system and focusing on going within instead of externalizing those motivations and validation of self.
Yeah, I just was going to follow up with that. So many times now we're hearing about traumas stored in the body.
Yes.
And so I think sometimes, or maybe I'd ask you, to me it seems like what's happening is the trauma that is stored in the body, people are eating to compensate and to make that feel better. And then their food isn't medicine, it's harmful, right?
Correct. That is absolutely something.
So do you address that in your course at HCC?
I do. I look
great.
at the behavior of your relationship with food, and I help you to find a healthier one. And that's also an incremental, step-by-step, day-by-day process.
And do the class members get to talk to each other?
Yeah.
So I just think that in itself has to be so wonderful that people don't feel that they're alone with this, right? That we're in this together.
Absolutely.
I love that part of that.
Yes, the support is the key.
So we're doing Walking to Wellness, and
We
you
are.
kicked off our Walking to Wellness program.
I'm so excited. I'm loving it, and I've actually been able to incorporate my children in this and my neighbors. I had just this past Wednesday for Walking to Wellness, my neighbor and her amazingly giant 7-month-old puppy dog got to come in and take part in that as well. So
That's
it's been
great.
awesome.
And what is Curves Ahead?
Curves Ahead is a monthly coaching program that I developed with Melissa DiMercurio. And what we essentially do is we have written a year's program where we focus on 5 pillars of strength: mindset, emotion, body, career, connection. And we take each piece of that and we help women to break it down into process steps that they can develop and educate themselves further.
That sounds wonderful, and people can check that out. We'll get your website information in just a minute. How about a High Achievers Mastermind?
So High Achievers Mastermind actually came out of a conference I attended that was Brendan Burchard's Growth Mindset and High Performance Academy. I had met a group of people that I was able to go and continuously meet with for every conference, and we decided to create a virtual mastermind group of our own. So we bring our ideas, our businesses, and our day-to-day life and kind of help each other to jump through obstacles and create new opportunities for one another.
That sounds great. And the last one I don't want to miss is Soldierfit Hagerstown.
Yes, Soldierfit Hagerstown is an incredible new gym that opened up here, but it is more than just the workout. We focus on group boot camp programs, and it really does attend to that mindset piece that I love, and personally it's my favorite aspect to any type of wellness program, is being able to see the person grow their mindset while they're changing their body.
That sounds great. Tina, you're also super involved in our community. Can you talk about your role with the Washington County Women's Commission and Rise Up Hagerstown?
Yes, I'd love to. So I actually just became the president-elect of the Washington
Yay.
County Commission for Women. So that starts my new year just off incredibly so. But I want to make sure I get my wording right. So our mission is to act as a catalyst for the change of educating women and advocating for them, promoting their role as the woman in their community, and helping to celebrate their accomplishments.
That's great. And Rise Up Hagerstown is another organization that you're serving with, right?
Yes. So Rise Up Hagerstown was developed by Rob Apgar-Taylor here locally in Hagerstown, and we serve as a second chance opportunity financially to those that have overcome addiction, overcome incarceration, or overcome traumas. We help them to find some financial stability while they're seeking that emotional health and well-being in their life.
And if somebody's looking to find out about that, where can they find that information?
They can go to riseuphagerstown.com.
Okay, perfect. And I was wondering, before we go, first if you could tell us the best advice you ever received, and then maybe pass on some words of wisdom to our viewers.
Absolutely. So the best advice I ever received was actually from my grandmother. When I was a little girl, she told me that I truly could do anything that I believed I could do. It took me quite a long time to understand that that was a truth, and I hadn't quite allowed it to assimilate into my life, but it's been a driving force behind everything I do today. And then I would embark upon all of your viewers to remember that it's never too late to begin again.
Okay.
That any stage or phase in life is theirs if they would like to take it to that next level.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I'm so grateful to Tina for being on today's show. Like me, she knows that progress starts with intentionally taking one small step toward a goal. Whether we're struggling to lose weight, cope with anxiety, or manage financial ups and downs, let's reach out to each other for support. Believe it or not, asking for help is a form of self-compassion and a kindness to others. By asking them, we share our struggles, we share our humanity, and we demonstrate humility and affirm others' needs to be needed. We don't have to do it alone. Celebrate, connect, empower one another today. Thanks for joining us on Prime Time for Women. Until next time, stay healthy and stay happy.